Who doesn't love the powerful legendary beasts that roam the various regions of the Pokemon world? They're so popular, in fact, that they seemingly justify Nintendo selling the same exact games several times with barely any differences, other than the big monsters on the front of the packaging. And yes, I will get into a fight over which of the Box Legendaries is better than the other one, thank you very much. But while we all know that those legendary Pokemon are extremely powerful, I couldn't help but wonder, which are stronger than the others? So I'm going to take a look at each group of the main legendary Pokemon and see how well they would do in a battle against one another. I'm going to focus on the powers and abilities that were introduced in the game lore and Pokédex entries, rather than game data. I'll also see the respective signature moves as essentially the representation of their powers at full extent. So if one signature move is more effective than the other, that will give that Pokemon a significant advantage. What kind of moves a Pokemon learns, as well as their typings, will be interesting in case of a form of stalemate, which will definitely happen. Mew is rumored to be the ancestor of all Pokemon, and has the ability to alter its genes in such a way that it can imitate any Pokemon. This allows it to learn any TM, HM or Move Tutor moves, and also allows it to transform into any other Pokemon at will. Even in its own form, it shows impressive abilities like speed and invisibility, but it also doesn't seem to have much interest in fighting. Mewtwo, on the other hand, loves fighting. Despite being an artificial clone of Mew, the two really don't have much in common. Mewtwo was created with the sole purpose of fighting and is described as the ultimate offense. It also has access to a Mega Evolution that boosts its power immensely. We see Mew and Mewtwo fight in the Mewtwo Strikes Back movie, and they reach a draw. However, there are two important abilities we do not get to see in that fight: Mew's Transform ability and Mewtwo's Mega Evolution. If we assume that Mew's Transform ability works similarly to the game's, that would mean it keeps its own HP stat, and apparently it cannot copy Mega Evolutions or Dynamax forms. It's questionable whether Mew can transform into anything that's strong enough to win against Mewtwo's base form, but with Mega Evolution, Mewtwo easily wins this fight. A little addition to the Transform ability. One might think that Mew could simply transform into legendary Pokemon to beat Mewtwo. However, in the Pokemon anime, we see Mew transformed into Lugia, and despite being powerful, its powers don't quite match Lugia's lore, which we'll get into more detail on later. That means there seems to be some sort of limit to its transform powers, and I don't think it can take out Mega Mewtwo. Ho-Oh is thought to be the guardian of the skies and represents rainbows and the color gold. According to its lore, it has the ability to resurrect other Pokemon, and it brings joy and happiness to the people who see it. Lugia is thought to be the guardian of the seas and represents storms and the color silver. It's capable of calming storms or creating them, simply by flapping its wings, blowing apart houses. This fight is a bit difficult as there isn't much information on either of these Pokemon. But Ho-Oh's powers seem more focused on benefiting others, which doesn't really help in a one-on-one fight. Also, Lugia learns a bunch of water-type moves, and Ho-Oh is a fire-type. Lugia takes this one. In Gen 3, we actually reach the point where legendary Pokemon become literal gods. Groudon is said to have raised the land and created continents by using its power to scatter rain clouds and evaporate water with extreme heat. Kyogre is said to be the creator of the sea, and is able to create massive rain clouds and torrential downpours. Groudon and Kyogre absolutely hate each other, and their battles are catastrophic for the rest of the world. However, whenever they do fight, Rayquaza swoops in to save the day. Rayquaza is a legendary dragon that has existed in the ozone layer for hundreds of millions of years. These battles take place in several instances of Pokemon. In Pokemon Generations, Rayquaza actually overpowers both Primal Groudon and Kyogre at the same time. In Pokemon Emerald, its sheer presence is enough to calm the legendary Pokemon down. According to ancient lore, Rayquaza's power overwhelmed that of the two primal Pokemon, and peace returned to the world. So it goes without saying that Rayquaza is the strongest in this trio. That seems to literally be its role. So as much as I would love to talk about Rayquaza more, there isn't much of a reason to. However, between Groudon and Kyogre, who would be able to win second place? Win second place. Now, we really have to distinguish between Gen 3 and 6. Generation 3 Groudon is this one. Its abilities are all centered around heat, but it's not a fire type. It's at a massive disadvantage against Kyogre in every possible way. Primal Reversion in Gen 6, however, makes a massive difference. First of all, Groudon finally gains its fire typing. Secondly, it becomes immune to water type moves. I'll just simply assume that both their weather effects would be up, otherwise this is a whole different conversation. But with that kind of power, Groudon gains one significant advantage. Kyogre's signature move does not affect it, but its own signature move does work. That means, at full power, Groudon is actually the winner. Well, second place. The Creation Trio consists of 3 of the most powerful Pokémon in existence, positioned directly under literal God. Palkia is the deity of space and is able to distort or stabilize it at will. It can also teleport and travel through dimensions. Dialga is the deity of time. Its very existence causes time to flow, so of course it also controls time. The same way Palkia controls space. Third in the trio is Giratina. It's a shadowy being that lives in the distortion world, after being banished for quote-unquote violence. Everything about it is very vague, including its abilities. It was somehow able to stop Palkia and Dialga from deforming space-time after they were captured by Cyrus, so I'd say its ability is to reverse Palkia's and Dialga's ability to nullify them. This also works hand in hand with the concept of the distortion world, which is sort of a reversed version of the real world, in which both time and space barely seem to exist at all. That means any fight with Giratina comes down to a good old, no abilities, hand to tentacle to leg combat. But first, let's talk about Palkia versus Dialga. Of course, the first question is, which is better? Space manipulation or time manipulation? Trying to find an answer to that question is, however, a fruitless endeavor, and many brave souls have tried, but failed to find it. The general consensus seems to be, whoever hits first, wins. Palkia has a higher speed stat, but at the same time it doesn't make much sense for a deity of time to be outsped, so I'll just go with a neutral option. Somewhere, somehow, their omnipotent powers cancel each other out or have some sort of limitation. Since Dialga and Palkia exist since creation, maybe they don't depend on the dimensions of time and space, so they're immune to each other. That means it comes down to an exchange of blows. In the Rise of Darkrai movie, Palkia pretty much lost against Dialga and was grievously wounded. In general, Dialga definitely has a type advantage over Palkia, as Spatial Rend hits neutral, while Roar of Time is super effective. In my opinion, Dialga takes it. But can Dialga also beat Giratina? Honestly, yes. We already established that time powers don't play into this, but following the same logic as with Palkia, Dialga can defend against Giratina's signature moves, but Giratina cannot defend against Roar of Time. That puts Dialga in first place. But is that even a surprise? Steel types are just simply that good. That leaves Giratina and Palkia to duke it out for second place. But I don't see Giratina surviving a Spatial Rend. Giratina might be able to stop Palkia and Dialga from destroying the world, but in a direct one-on-one fight, it does not win. Unless, of course, the ominous violence that it was banished for gives it some sort of edge over the other two. But I think that's more about having a cranky temper. Or I guess it could use a Destiny Bond and just take its opponent with it. The fucker would. Look at it. Legends say that originally a pair of heroes founded the Unova region, aided by their partner, the first ever dragon Pokemon in existence. However, the two trainers fought about how to lead the new region, and eventually split up. Not knowing who to follow, the dragon Pokemon decided to split itself into Zekrom and Reshiram, who each followed one of the trainers. The empty husk left behind would later become Kyurem. Reshiram stands for the ideal of truth, and is said to punish those who are ignorant and greedy. It uses its fire abilities to change the world's weather. Zekrom stands for the ideal of dreams, and is said to punish those who lose righteousness. Both Reshiram and Zekrom's abilities are based on the flow of energy, and represent energy in different states. Kyurem, as the empty husk left behind, represents the lack of energy with its ice abilities. It is also said to have even greater power than the other two, but that power is frozen by the cold, which means that were it to achieve the energy it needs, it could unlock that greater power. And Kyurem does have the ability to absorb one of the other two in order to get closer to the original dragon Pokemon. That means that Kyurem is essentially the heart of this battle. An unfused Kyurem loses. Always. A fused Kyurem wins. Always. And since I decided to compare the legendaries at their full potential, that makes Kyurem Gen 5's winner. As for Reshiram vs Zekrom, that is far more complicated. Literally designed to be exact counterparts for one another, they seem to be completely equal. Essentially they're both the same amount of energy, just flowing in different states. I suppose it is valid to call this our first draw, and if that doesn't satisfy you, lightning produces about 1 billion joules of energy. I couldn't really find how much fire it would take to produce the same amount of energy, but the surface area would be much bigger. Therefore, Zekrom can do more damage to a singular point, and that should win in a one-on-one fight. Happy? It's still second place. I don't want to overload you with information more than I already have, so let's call it a day here. Here's a little overview of the results so far. If you'd like to see Generation 6 and onward, make sure to subscribe and come back for the second part of this video. Until then, have a lovely day and treat yourself to something nice. This allows it to learn any TM, HM, Mew tutor. Get it? Mew tutor.